Hey everybody, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, and when I'm not out attempting to be a consummate athlete, I'm probably indoors on a computer writing about how to be a consummate athlete.
And I'm Peter Glassford. I'm a registered kinesiologist and an endurance coach. I work mostly with Master's Age or adult clients who are trying to do crazy things with busy schedules. And really just trying to be consummate athletes. And that is someone who, does a variety of different movements and gets outdoors and does it in a community. And that's what we talk about here on the Consummate Athlete Podcast.
How many times can we say consummate in one episode? We'll find out. So, Peter, what have we been up to this week?
Well, we're still very fortunate to be in California. So I've been bike riding, and Molly's been easing her way back into running training after some time off with knee pain and also undertaking elite cycling training randomly.
I mean, why wouldn't you, right?
I guess the opportunity presented itself and I guess was timely with your injury, so you were able to mix that in.
Yeah, I have to actually add a shout out as far as we've been trying to do a one thing we're into this week on every episode. I'm going to give mine this week to the Interval app. It's just a free app for iPhone, and you can set it basically so you can do high-low is sort of the normal point of it, but I've been using it for run walk. So, I've been slowly ramping up my run volume, and I've found, the biggest thing that was making my knee sort of regress was just going out and hitting even 30-minute runs. So I've been breaking it up. I started with 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and the Interval app, dings every minute for you once you set it to whatever. I'm now up to 2.5 minutes of running and then 30-second break, and I can do that for pretty much forever and no problems. But it's been really easy to have that dinging in my ear so I don't get caught off, trying to check my watch.
Yeah, I think I told you about that. I think I use that in the gym. I think that's the one I use in the gym for timing things when we're doing sort of timed circuit training or something with clients.
Yeah, and that's definitely what it's more meant for, I think, but it's been working perfectly, and it can play in the background, so I'm still listening to podcasts and music.
I think it's open to whatever. It's just the thing is it lets you set up a Tabata interval or any sort of if you want to do a 6-minute interval with a 1 minute off or whatever, right? And that could be walking or coasting or laying on the ground between your crossfitting.
Yeah, I will say that today I had a bit of an issue with it where I started it and it was fine, and for some reason it must have X'd out. I think my iPhone's just a little bit weird lately. So it X'd out and I was running my first interval and I'm like, 2.5 minutes feels like a really long time. And did that for I think 5 minutes before I finally was like, I'm going to check and see how much time I have left, and realized that it had stopped. But that's the first time it's happened, and I've been using it for almost a month now with no issues. So yeah, that's my one thing. Peter, do you have any?
Well, last week I was on the sardines, or 2 weeks ago. So I've been pretty much keeping up my sardines every day. Lately I've been doing that with some hot sauce and some arugula. I think I might have said that before. I don't know if I have a new thing. I've been getting a lot of clients to go and walk. It's been sort of really miserable at home in the general Toronto area, greater Toronto area.
That's definitely your one thing. That's all you've been talking about lately.
Yeah, so we've been seeing what the heart rate response is. And, I have a range of clients. Like I say, some folks are sort of are newer to endurance sports. Some are very endurance trained. So it's just interesting. I'm just sort of collecting data on just, what is that heart rate response on flat walking? And I don't know if there's any huge conclusions, but I think, some of the heart rates are higher. And so that might mean that walking is actually a training method that we could use fairly easily with some of these folks who are just getting into training, right? That cardiovascular load is actually significant enough, right? So, yeah.
I mean, there's that saying, you have to walk before you can run. And I think I'd say a lot of cyclists in particular kind of fall into that. They want to run right off the bat, but really walking would provide as much just a ton of stimulus for that, low endurance level.
Well, I think if you run, I think that's a no-brainer. But for cyclists, it's maybe a slightly bigger stretch. But like I say, when we're talking about cross-training, if the cardiovascular load is there, I think that's at least for the short term, that's probably a good thing and something that could be combined with, a trainer ride, right? And that, or cycling, or anything. to just get a little longer workout without it being quite so miserable, right? You can walk with your family, or we've talked about that lots, and that's sort of the base of our consummate athlete lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of people living the consummate athlete lifestyle, let's get into today's guest, James Slauson, who is this is actually the first time we're doing something like this on the show. So please let us know, what you think about it. Hit us up on Twitter or Instagram or, through the contact page on our site. But we actually wanted to talk to someone who is sort of embodying the real life consummate athlete thing. Someone who's not a former elite racer or, current elite racer, has no aspirations of going pro in a certain category at some point, just really loves the idea of, staying active, staying healthy, getting out on adventures.
Yeah, I think this is sort of like, on different TV shows and stuff, they'll say, oh, we will take a look, at the end of the show, they often do it. We'll take a look at what the listeners are up to or whatever. And so today we have James Slauson, who is actually a doctor. So I say it to him at the end, and I think he's actually quite qualified to be on the show just as a legitimate guest, but he's had the idea of sort of having listeners and was game for it. So him and I have a really interesting conversation, one that I really enjoyed. And again, as a doctor and someone who's got a fair bit of experience in different sports, we had, I think came away with a really good conversation.
Yeah, so again, let us know what you think of this episode. And I mean, if you or someone seems like they would be a great fit, maybe hit us up again on the consummateathlete.com contact page. And without further ado, let's dive into this episode. Enjoy.
A year or two before I started listening to you all, I became more of the consummate athlete and all around lifting, yoga, running, and less cycling. I'm just more interested in my long-term health and longevity and, physical and emotional fitness. So.
Well, why don't you jump in? I mean, this is all good so far, but tell us a bit, you're a physician and stuff. What changed there, like you say, 2 or 3 years ago? Why, you were a lifelong cyclist, but why start looking at running or these other aspects of health?
Well, I'd always run and I'd always kind of enjoyed it. Once you really get into hardcore road cycling, there is that kind of elite attitude with road cyclists, and boy, they really look down on runners and triathletes, and so I would always run in the wintertime for variety and a little endurance and things like that. But I got away from running just because I wanted to maximize my cycling performance, and it was all about don't do anything that could compromise your cycling. So that's why I got away from running. I would pick it up in the winter and it would be nice. And then I just started enjoying it a little more. And these people that are doing these streaks, a boss that I currently have, he's been running a mile a day for 10 years. And my wife was doing it for a while until she broke her leg, and now she walks every day. And when I got just kind of a little more turned on to running 3-4 years ago, I was like, let me see if there's something I can do running wise without too much detriment to my cycling. So I picked a half an hour a day, which has worked really, really well. I wanted to do something that would, if I did nothing else during the day, it would give me a true workout, but it wouldn't really diminish my cycling performance, and I could still do something later in the day if I wanted to. And plus, it's sustainable, mentally sustainable. And I got reaffirmation of that this December because I kind of ramped up my running this winter, building up some endurance. So I did an hour a day in December, and that was really hard. That was really hard physically, and that was really hard mentally doing that. So my half hour has been good. So then after I added cycling or running back, I started lifting a little bit again. And then I got turned on to some yoga and meditation and just kind of the whole package. And it's been a great journey.
So I would imagine what I've personally found is that the running is definitely helpful when you're busy or the weather's bad or you're traveling. Is that what you've sort of found? Like it almost lets you continue with your training program because you can't be on your bike all the time?
and it keeps you accountable. You know, habits are so hard to make and so easy to break. And if you run every day, you're obviously active every day, and so that just kind of keeps you in that athlete mindset. But yeah, we travel a lot. I'm a ER physician, so I've kind of set my life up where I only work a certain shift. I work night shifts, and I work for 2 weeks a month, and so we're off for 2 weeks a month, and we drive around everywhere. And so I run at different times of day. If we're driving, I may get out and run before midnight somewhere. It just having that ability to jump around and pick different times makes running easier. You know, you can't really cycle for 30 minutes a day in different environments and getting ready and all that.
Yeah, especially when you're on the road or at night, I guess, too. So I'm wondering, where do you find the time then to ride? Like, is that you're riding mostly then when you're not on those 2 weeks on?
Well, I do schedule. You know, I make sure that I kind of put my loose workout plan on my calendar. And generally, I will work all night and I'll run 30 minutes in the morning. And then I usually get up a couple hours before work and I'll ride or I'll lift. When I'm off, obviously I ride a little more, but you know, I generally try to do two things in one day.
Really like that. Yeah, the frequency thing is, I think, an underutilized aspect of fitness.
Yeah, and I've been careful, and I, listen to my body. Yeah, I think you all use the HRV for training app, and I've been using that for several years, and I pay attention to that. And some days I really try to listen to my body. That's the hard part, right? Because your mind is always telling you 12 good reasons not to go for a run or for a ride, all of which are legitimate, and you could easily go to sleep and sleep well. But your body, that's the one that really gives you the signals that say whether you should do it or not. That's the challenge, knowing which is right.
Have you found with the HRV for training, like, do you modify if you get sort of a red day where you maybe walk or do yoga instead of, hit a high intensity? Like, have you sort of started tweaking things that way with it, or what have you found with the HRV app?
Well, I will, I run every day, and I use an app while I'm running called Zombies Run. And it's an interesting app that gives a story of a zombies apocalypse, and it's in season 8. And there's a feature where you can turn chases on. You can be chased by zombies. So
I think Molly is going to be terrified, but also love this. So this is good.
And so this is fantastic. This actually, I'd forgotten that Zombies Run is one of the reasons I really got back into running. Also, we could expound on that in a second. But so anyway, so you can turn chases on, and you get like random. I think you can select it, but I've got it selected to 2 to 3 chases per 30 minutes, and they're random during the run, and it's about a 30-second sprint where if you increase your speed, say 20%, you elude the zombies, and if you don't increase your speed, they catch you, or you have to drop an item and you get evaded. So on days that my HRV is low and I'm not doing good, I turn the chases off. So I modify that a little bit. If I've got a hard ride planned or a group ride, I'll sit in more. So I definitely will try to listen to that, because I think, as a physician, I will tell you that HRV for training, heart rate variability is the single most important thing that everybody should do, and it's free essentially.
And I think, especially in the way they've done it, where you're also doing some of the subjective measures, right, that I think are also well supported, things like the motivation and sleep and soreness, things like that.
Absolutely. And there's other platforms. There's Elite HRV, and then there's just some HRV apps that you can just look at your HRV. But the guy that's doing HRV for training, I think, did you guys interview Marco Altini?
Yeah, we've had him on twice actually. Yeah, and I've done a bit of work with them, and I'm playing around with the pro software now for them as well.
Yeah, and he is. I mean, his research is first class. His algorithms and the way it's not just, oh, your HRV is this today, you should run, or that. So yeah, it's massaged very well, and it's really, really useful.
Awesome. So then we have night shift, and then I see you sort of sent me a bunch of stuff here, and I'm sort of working through it. Tell me a bit about the food bit. We've talked a bit about sleep and the importance of sort of rest, and you're mixing up your exercises. So you definitely qualify as a consummate athlete. What are you doing food wise?
Well, I've always kind of, as a physician and someone who's interested in health, I've always tried to eat well and kind of gone with the trends of what's being promoted as the most healthful eating at the time. So probably 8 years or so, I started eating vegetarian because that's really, if you chose a population and said you can only have one diet, and we want to maximize the health of the population, it's vegetarian, and I think I can defend that. So I said I'm going to do vegetarian. People that are in vegetarian pockets of the world don't get heart disease and they live longer. There's a lot of the blue zones are vegetarian. So I did that, and that was fine. I enjoyed it. As a typical vegetarian, I probably ate a little too much sweets and processed sugars because that's the challenge, right? Is being a good vegetarian. But we're pretty good about it. I would go off it when I'd go to Milwaukee every summer and eat some bratwurst and things like that. But there's a couple of young kids in my town that are top-notch cyclists, and I started working with them and kind of coaching them, and I really got into the science and reading again of what the current thoughts are in fitness and nutrition and this, that, the other. And one thing I kind of came across was, the general population probably would do the best with vegetarianism, but as Peter Glassford would like to say, for the individual, it depends. And so for an athlete, probably a whole food diet, including meat, is more important and just as healthy, if not healthier, for long-term success. My goal is to live to 100 years old and to get sick about 3 days before I die, and that's just kind of what I'm trying to maximize.
Yeah, and go out in a big ball of flames all at once.
Yeah. And so I don't mind being wrong about things and changing what I do. I'm not going to stick to what I do because of stubbornness. So I just went back to eating a whole diet and meat, and that's how that journey went.
I love it. Yeah, and there's definitely crossover, right? There's Molly. I'll be the first one to say that she was basically like an Oreo and like vegetarian pizza type vegan, and got quite sick doing that in triathlon. And then there's the argument against meat, and it's very similar, right? Like a lot of the people are eating really poorly and poor choices of meat and stuff, right? And you don't really get, the examples of someone who's eating, only a little bit of grass-fed meat and a couple good servings of, some sustainably caught fish or something like that, and not to excess, and then just a ton of veggies on top of that, right? So sort of like vegan plus, responsibly farmed and maintained meat. You don't really get that. What does that look like, right? Is that person healthy? Is that person rolling pretty well?
Right.
And you're right, there's probably variation between people too, right? There's the people that maybe would be better with the vegetarian diet, and people that would be better perhaps even just with like the full out all meat diet maybe.
Yeah, I think of meat like I think of alcohol. There's this thought, and there's some truth to it, that a couple glasses of wine a day is healthy. Well, if you look at where that comes from, that's in an unhealthy population. So if you have hypertension, diabetes, you're obese, and you smoke, a couple of glasses of wine will actually lower your risk of heart disease. But if you don't do any of those things, if you get your proper sleep and you're an athlete and you don't have diseases and take drugs, alcohol is only a toxin. It will not enhance your lifespan or your health. And so meat's really the same way, right? If you're not healthy, eating meat's going to be bad for you. But if you are a healthy person, it's going to be good for you because it's what sustains your health. So if that makes sense.
I think that's the great insight, right? And that's even with training, which is, I guess, more in my wheelhouse. You see the same thing, right? People want to argue sweet spot versus polarized. This was the 2018 big debate. And it just is so much depends on what type of person and engine you've already built, right? And what you'll benefit from. So I think that's a really good insight that the nutrition that you need right now is going to evolve based on what you've done, and just the environment you're in, right?
Exactly right. You just slowly build on your platform, on your foundation and then you don't make dramatic changes. That's the key and that's what I've been excited about is, like Molly's book on nutrition is fantastic, I think, because nutrition research is terrible, and it has to be terrible because it's just difficult to do. So if you're an athlete that's looking for nutrition tips, you should read a book like Molly's because she's interviewed athletes. So it's like, what is working? What are athletes actually eating? And not what the science in the lab says or what people recall that they're eating in a survey. And so, reading the books, the endurance diet, what are all the athletes around the world doing? And then saying, okay, well, what am I eating? And then rather than changing what I'm eating today to exactly what everybody else is eating tomorrow, it's like, well, let's just add a little of this, subtract a little of that, see if I like that, see if I don't, making the small changes and of all of your training, right? All of your life. And so the eating's just an example of that.
Yeah. I always say you're not at 0% whatever you're doing, right? So don't like wipe it all out and start again. You may as well do, whatever you're doing, and then, okay, I'm going to try having sardines every day at lunch, which is what I'm doing at the moment. And just see what's the difference, right? Taking alcohol out for a week and seeing what's the difference, right? It's
watch your heart rate variability and like that too. While you do that, I mean, I'm really into quantification. That's the biggest reason I love Strava, is just because I've been quantifying what I've been doing for 10 years. And, I do my Fitness Pal, and I can quantify everything.
Right.
For some people, that may be a little too obsessive. For me, it works, and it works for me. So
we've talked nutrition. We've talked a bit about training. You had another quote here. I'm just trying to find it about the game of life. Do you recall that quote?
Yes. Oh, are we getting into my life philosophies, or some people might call dadisms?
Sure.
I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for old guy jokes here. So I think that covers, though, it gets sort of the mental side of it too, and sort of how you look at things.
Yeah, I've got a lot of, I work with a lot of just super bright young people, nurses, technicians, clerks. People in the medical field are just bright. It's a pleasure to work with, but they're all 30 years younger than me. And we work nights, and sometimes it's really busy and we're real close, and sometimes it's not so busy, so we chat. And I try to give people that want insider advice some insight. I try not to force stuff, but I'll say things now and then that they'll be interested in, so we'll talk. So they've got a list of my life rules, and one of them is, most games, the way to win most games is to never play. Okay, the prison system is horrible in the U.S. Well, don't enter the prison system. Just things like that. But you have to play the game of life, right? We're alive, and we're only going to be alive for so long, and we're only going to have one carcass to carry us through it. So So that's the game of life that's the game you got to play. And that's where just maximizing your health and fitness is so important to me, and what I stress to people that want to hear about it.
Yeah, and I think that fits with that no dramatic changes either, right? Like it's just sort of you're trying to get one more point, I guess, if we're gamifying it, right? Each day or each week, we're just trying to get a little bit better, knowing in the back that you're not really done. I guess you're done at some point, but you're not winning at any point, right?
Right. You won't know until the final analysis, but you get signals. You know, we were laughing last night at work because we often will see patients from the emergency department at restaurants or at our local grocery stores. It's a little uncomfortable, a little weird. And I just kind of had this epiphany when I was at the gym the other night, and I looked around and I said, you know something, we will never see our patients at the gym, will we? It's kind of a safe space. So that's a little signal, right, that we're doing the right things.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. With that, though, is that sad, though, that you don't see them at the gym?
No, it's not. You know, people will do what they do. They have choices. They have knowledge, and you know, I liken it to when I did more office-based stuff and primary care medicine, and I was in the military, and these older gentlemen would say, well, the government got me addicted to cigarettes and yada, yada, yada. And I'd say, well, you know, it was 1963 that the Surgeon General came out and said, tobacco and cigarettes are bad for your health. You know, you've had this knowledge for 20, 30 years, so it's a cop-out to say that it's not your fault and that you don't have a choice and that you can't be doing something about it. And that's how I feel about health, nutrition, and fitness is people have the knowledge and they're making their own choices. So I don't feel bad. I'm just very in the moment person, accept someone for who they are, and their journey is their journey. I don't judge them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a wisdom to that, right? And I think the more you can get someone advocating for themselves, I guess, is the way they talk about it. You know, certainly in the population I deal with, where it's people who are trying to train for a somewhat arbitrary thing, right? Ultimately, it's not life and death, any of it, right? We're not, and few of us are going for any sort of money or large winnings with cycling or any other of these sports. But when we have an injury or an illness, right, it's a lot of people, I think, sometimes expect, you know, the doctor or whoever to be doing everything, and so much of it is advocating for yourself and doing a bit of this. You know, you're doing your HRV for training or your daily run or tweaking the diet, right?
Watching my weights, and I don't get sick very often because I work out every day. I don't get injured because I work out every day, and I'm doing it for a long time. I've got a good foundation. Going back to whether I feel a sense of sadness for the patients or anything like that, and I don't, you know, I don't want to sound too callous. You know, I do think personally I have an obligation to at least set an example, you know, and that's always been a area of consternation is healthcare people that smoke or healthcare people that now are very obese because obesity is so rampant, you know. So I think I have an obligation. You can tell if someone's fit when they walk in the room. You know, I have an obligation to portray health, and also to the people that I work with, you know, because I run every morning, and sometimes some people run with me. And just the fact that they know I run every morning, will put that in some people's mind that that's a good thing to do. And so I do try to set an example. I haven't given up on people, if that's kind of how I came across. But, you know, you do have to let people do their own thing.
Yeah, and like you say, give them space to change, but you can't push them towards that, right? Like, it's in no way especially in the emergency room, it's not your job to, you know, encourage them to start running or something, right? It's really well beyond the emergency room.
Right. That was more when I was in primary care. You know, the person that would come and say, well, Dr. Slauson, I could get hit by a truck on the way out the door. I said, yeah, I know, but you're probably not. So you've got to lose some weight and stop smoking and exercise, things like that. So
yeah, some of that, the chances of diabetes versus getting hit by a truck. Interesting. So you gave us a bunch of book recommendations, and I'll try and put links to most of those. But if you could pick one, maybe one last year that you felt was like really just like blew your mind, and you've mentioned Molly's, but beyond sort of Molly's stuff, what books sort of just caught your eye last year?
Are you talking about the stuff that I've read? Because I've read about a dozen books from you all. Thank you so much.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
um,
Really, any, just even what comes to mind first is just, changed the way you thought about something or really struck a chord with you.
well, probably the two most important books that I've read in the last couple of years are one that you all is the sleep book. Do you have the title of the sleep book there?
Yep. Why We Sleep, is that
Why
the
We
one?
Sleep by Matthew Walker. Yeah, there it is.
Nice.
I think everybody should read that book. It is it's a good read, and it goes into the history of sleep, why we sleep, how we sleep differently during different ages, and how much sleep we should get, how we basically became the dominant species on the planet because of sleep, how sleep formulates takes our daily learning and cements it into the hard drive and interacts it with all of the other knowledge that we've gained, how sleep is restorative. As an athlete, your gains are made during sleep. Your gains aren't made, trite phrase, but your gains aren't made while you're running. Your gains are made, after the run. But your gains also aren't made when you're compressing or stretching or resting. Your gains are actually made during sleep. That's when your body is as metabolically active during sleep as it is while you're awake during the day. So, sleep's the most foundation. The guy that I follow for longevity, his name is Peter Attia. He's a kind of longevity expert who his lifelong goal is longevity, and he has a podcast that he interviews all kinds of experts in longevity. And, he says of sleep, nutrition, and exercise, if one is untouchable, it's sleep. That's the most important thing. So that's kind of important to me.
So now, while you're doing it, so did you change anything after you sort of got onto that book and sort of looked at that? Like, obviously with your job, there's a bit of risk there. Like, was there anything
Absolutely
that you tweaked or used, especially for the night shift? I know we have a few people. My younger brother actually works night shift, so I'm always sort of concerned about him. So I'm wondering if you took anything away from that.
Right. Yeah. So the World Health Organization has listed sleep as a cancer, or has listed shift work as a cancer risk. And as an ER physician, I do shift work, and particularly night work is the big one. So when I chose to do this, I said, well, what's my theory on why it's such a cancer risk? And I thought it was because of lack of sleep. Because I know that, research will tell you that people that do night shift, people that do shift work don't get as much sleep as people that work 9 to 5. They're keeping their phones on. They're trying to fit some stuff in the morning and then get up early before. They're trying to take care of it, So I said, well, I think probably sleep is the biggest thing that could. So I always try to maximize my sleep. My family was always fantastic. They know that, when I'm asleep, it's not, my phone is off, and I'm not to be bothered unless, people are handing out money on the streets or there's some catastrophic emergency going on. And then, we've maximized we moved into a new house in the last year, and we just spent time and energy of just darkening it out the room, and we use a noisemaker. And so I'm just trying to maximize it that way. So that's the way I think I'm hoping to beat the shift work downside, is by maximizing my sleep. But it helps with every aspect of your life too, emotionally, mentally, your physical, your sports performance. So I really recommend everybody read that book. It's fantastic, and I think it'll be really insightful.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're right on there, and I think because you sort of have a routine that's based around that night shift, you're probably right that you're mitigating a lot of that, right? You're not going back and forth with the sort of days and nights.
But, like for your brother or for anybody who's a shift worker, making sleep the priority, and then, just like scheduling your 8 hours of sleep and then scheduling when you're getting ready for sleep 30 minutes and then when you're getting up, make that a priority, and that's how you can pull it off.
Yeah, I love that you got the sleep scheduled, you got the workouts scheduled in there, and then you're going to work and doing good work there. So I think those are some high performance tips right there. Was there a second book that you thought was sort of key last year?
I really enjoyed Born to Run. I hadn't read it, and I started running 3-4 years ago, and now I read Born to Run. And as a physician scientist, just reading the chapters on our foot and why it's completely designed for running, and on the body anthropology of why we're completely designed to run, it's just refreshing. Maybe I made the right choice, and it's just so well written. But again, I think that we're supposed to sleep 8 hours a night, and I think this book lays out cogent argument that we're supposed to run probably barefoot-ish. So I even added a pair of barefoot shoes into my shoes cycling. I cycle through my shoes on a daily basis. So that was fantastic too.
Yeah, but I think that's a smart way to do it for sure, to gradually get there, right? If we didn't start running when we were born, then there's probably a bit of an on-ramp for that, getting back to running maybe barefoot or running more, but
take it slow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll run barefoot on a beach. I'll run with barefoot shoes on the streets, but I won't do it at night yet, and things like that, So I'm still going slow because I don't want to end up with a big cut on my foot or a stone bruise, and then I can't run for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Or the soft tissue too. It seems like I'm always much better with them, but I still find I'm good walking and hiking and stuff with them, but I'm very prone to sort of foot and ankle, calf stuff, whereas Molly tends more towards hip and knee. So
that would argue that you should be on a barefoot platform and migrate towards it, right? That's the point of the book, is that's where those injuries come from, is that we've gone to the cushioned shoes that aren't natural. So, but also N=1, your experience is your experience, and if barefoot type of walking and running injures you, it injures Peter Glassford. He can't do it.
Well, Peter Glassford just spent a lot of time pedaling a bicycle with narrow shoes on, unfortunately. So, or fortunately, but as far as my barefoot running, yeah.
We could go on for an hour about the books, and that's just another key point is, just this constant learning and adjusting. When I kind of became a consummate athlete several years ago, and then of course 2 years later I ran into your podcast, which is just serendipitous timing. And I've just been reading since then, and it just made my life better. It's made me better mentally and physically, and I still race my bike pretty good for a 55-year-old guy. And I just did a long mountain bike race last weekend and really enjoyed it.
And that's awesome. I think that's, the important bit we're trying to get along to people here is, it's not necessarily that you're not doing the sport that you wanted to do. In many cases it is cycling, but that there is sort of maybe an upside if you're feeling better, you're healthier, you're moving better, and maybe you're even training a bit more because you're able to maintain through weather or busy times or travel, right? Whereas I know a lot of clients, they go away on family vacation and there's a big zero in the training log, right? Whereas if they could run, they could be running every day like you do, right?
Mm-hmm. And one other point I'd like to bring up too, you talked about the family vacations, is there's the thought of genetics determining our health, and that things run in families. And recently we've felt, wait a minute, maybe that's not quite so prevalent. Maybe it's just that families do what families do. So if you grew up doing barbecues and beer and things on the weekends and watching TV and sitting around at night, that's what you're going to do, and that's what your kids are going to do with you. Maybe that's why the health is not good. Where if you grew up in a family that went skiing in the winter and hiking in the summer and went on vacation and ran on the beach and things like that, you're probably going to model that behavior, and your kids are going to do that. So that's just another important tip, I think.
Yeah, I think that gets in under sort of epigenetics too, right? You might have sort of a prevalency to something, but if your environment then sort of is such that you've mitigated, say diabetes risk with being active throughout your youth and with your parents or whatever, right, then you're maybe not as prevalent or don't end up with it.
Absolutely huge. You're exactly right.
Well, that's interesting. I really enjoyed talking to you. There's so much stuff there, and yeah, I'm just so psyched that you were that excited. You suggested that maybe come on and chat with us, and yeah, Molly and I both really appreciate your listening and following along with the stuff and support.
Yeah, it's a privilege, and you guys have been interviewing the Blue Zone athletes, and I hope maybe just interviewing an average athlete is helpful to you and your audience. So
I hope so. Yeah, well, we'll see what people think, but I think there's a lot of good takeaways there, and I think it is useful to see, non-pros or non, someone who's sort of going after, full-time training, right? I think sometimes seeing someone who's working pretty hard at their job, and how they do this.
That's fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Consummate Athlete podcast. You can check out my stuff over at theoutdooredit.com or by following me on Instagram and Twitter at Molly J. Herford. And you can check out Peter's coaching, training plans, blogs, all that fun stuff over at smartathlete.ca or by following him on Twitter and Instagram at Peter Glassford. And if you want to support this show and other awesome podcasts, please check out wideanglepodium.com for show info, other podcasts, bonus content, and to become a donating member so you can get all of that rad behind the scenes content and help keep shows like this on the air. And lastly, if you're enjoying this podcast and all the information that we're bringing to you every single week, do us a solid and pop into iTunes to leave us a rating and review. It takes you about 2 seconds. You can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone, and it really helps us out. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week.